I wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking about autism and what we can do to optimize the chances of a healthy pregnancy. So, we're doing a deep dive into the diet and lifestyle changes we can see around autism recovery. This is a really impactful episode that's not to scare anybody. It's really how do you empower yourself to know there's specific things you can do to optimize healthy pregnancy. And we talk about detox pathways, we talk about gut infections and food sensitivities, and also we're talking about trauma. So excited for you to listen to today's episode. Hey there, I'm Sarah Clark, founder of FabFertile and your host. I believe the functional approach is the first step for anyone struggling with infertility, and my aim is to help you get pregnant naturally. Today, I'm welcoming Luminas Journey to the podcast, and we're digging into autism and why this matters when you are trying to conceive. Luminas is an autism recovery expert helping parents discover and address the root causes of their child's challenging autism behaviors so that a child can be calm, happy, and develop to a peer level and gain independence. And so parents can feel competent, empowered, and happy. She trained as a scientist in genetics, cell biology, and biochemistry, as a functional nutritionist, and a holistic healer. She works with clients throughout the world using nutrition, open body systems, and removing toxic buildup to help shift autism behaviors. Thanks so much for listening. I'm so thankful that you're here. Make sure you hit subscribe or follow. And if you know someone else who's on the fertility journey, please share this podcast with them. Hey, Luminas, excited to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Can you share your journey and really how you came to do this work?
Yeah, so I became an autism recovery expert. Well, it started with my own health issue, which got me into a particular healing modality, which got me interested in autism. So when I moved to where I live now in Oregon, I was sitting in the park with my son with like really bad allergies, and my eyes were just running and itching, and I was sneezing constantly, and the wind was blowing and the pollen anyway, it was really bad. And one of the dads in the park said, "Oh, go see this guy who does NMT. It'll take care of your allergies." And NMT stands for neuromodulation technique. And so he said it got rid of my son's peanut allergy. And I knew those could be pretty dangerous, right? So I go to see this guy who does the neuromodulation. And within 2 sessions of seeing him, my allergies are 90% decreased and my vision spontaneously improved. And, my vision had never improved since I was 12. I had glasses. And so I thought, this is really curious. Can we work on my vision? And so we did that. And over about a year's time, my lens prescription decreased by 33%. Well, my lens prescription had never decreased. It had only gotten worse every time I went to the doctor. So I knew there was something to this that told me, oh my gosh, this is great. And so I learned the healing modality is based on principles of quantum physics. So it's a science. I was a scientist by training, so it made sense to me being science. And so when I started helping people, I was listed on someone's website for autism and, for allergies, because I was interested in taking care of allergies. And I would help kids with allergies, but then other things would happen, just like happened with my vision. Like I remember one little boy, maybe he was 9-ish, and he used to go to the chiropractor twice a week, and he didn't have to go to the chiropractor as often because his corrections would hold just from the NMT we did with his allergies. And that happened, just recently with a client as well, an older boy. And the mom's like, I don't know. We just don't have to go to the chiropractor as often. So, odd things, and like anxiety would decrease, and, just things would happen. So I started getting really interested in autism. I've always worked with kids. I love kids. They are our future. So your parents who are, wanting children, we're creating the future here, right? And I want kids to be healthy because they're going to be our leaders and our managers and everything. So I just got really educated in many, many ways in the field of autism. And I realized that the neuromodulation, what it does is it looks for mistakes the body's making and gives the body a correction on how to correct those mistakes. So for example, if someone, this isn't autism, but if someone has low back pain and they've had it for 30 years, what if that sensor that's picking up and registering as pain is really, it's not a pain sensor, it's a vibration sensor or a tension sensor. or a heat or cold sensor, and the brain is misinterpreting it. So we find these mistakes of misinterpretation within the nervous system and correct it and say, hey, that really wasn't a pain receptor, that was vibration. And then the pain appears to go away, right? Like 30 years of pain gone. So that's how the neuromodulation works. And what I found is that that wasn't enough. I could get so far with the kids with autism and it wasn't quite enough. And then I thought, oh, if you're going to make a change in the body and need to remodel something, you need raw materials, you need nutrients, which is, the biomedical approach, which is vitamins and minerals and fish oils and stuff like that, which goes a little way further. And then what I realized is actually, in order to get all those good nutrients into the body, you have to take out what's already there. And what's already there is like a huge buildup of toxicity in these kids' bodies. So my current focus is taking out the toxicities in a safe way, in the right order, in the right way. And when you do that in any body, not just a body with autism, when you do that, things start connecting and working better. Cells start talking to each other. And yes, you need the nutrients, but you don't need as many. And maybe you can just get them from your food. So I see this example of kids with autism with all this stuff in their body. They're an extreme example of pretty much all of us today. We all have this built up toxicity to some degree, and our body is really clever in finding out where to put it, to store it away. And they'll come back later to haunt us usually, when we have a trauma or a big emotional thing. So our parent dies, something.
Yeah, I wanted to bring you on the podcast because I really thought, not to scare people, right? This is all about how do we optimize our body for a baby, and obviously we're working with couples that are on the fertility journey, and many have had multiple failed IVFs and IUIs. It hasn't worked. They've tried to get pregnant naturally for a year or more, and we're typically focusing with people with premature ovarian insufficiency or diminished ovarian reserve. Many times they've been told that donor eggs are their only option. And so if they've gone to IVF and it's been there's been poor response, they've had canceled cycles, have been through a lot of trauma associated with the fertility journey. And they may have also had trauma before that as well. So I wanted to talk about this topic, not to scare anybody, but really to be, what are some steps you can take to optimize your body for a healthy baby? So why would someone who's trying to conceive, why would this discussion matter to them?
Yeah, first of all, I love the way you frame that we're not trying to scare people. I see it, we're just like, if we had a horse with blinders, we're just taking the blinders off so we can see more possibilities. So why would this be important? I just want to start with a statistic is that 54% of children in the US have a chronic illness. So that could be allergies, asthma, some autoimmune, maybe cancer, maybe autism is big, 1 in 44. So when we look at these statistics, we say, why is this happening? We're just living in an ever more toxic environment. So I work with kids with autism, parents with kids with autism, but it's everywhere. It's pervasive. So that's why it matters. It matters to all of us because, you don't want a child with autism probably because it's a lot of extra work, but you probably don't want to have a child who has chronic allergies or asthma where you have to worry and have an inhaler. Like you just want an easy, smooth, life for your child, right? So that's why it matters, because if we're bringing kids into the world, into quite a toxic world, we need to think of all the strategies, one, to prepare the body, but also two, to have as stress-free, toxin-free as possible home and life for that child.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that preconception period where a lot of times we're spending 12 to 18 months preparing for the wedding, and then we want to get pregnant in the first month. How do we switch that around? Sometimes 12 or 18 months can be a lot for people, but at a minimum of 6 months. And both my kids, I had both my kids with donor eggs, and years later discovered food sensitivities and gut infections and chronic stress for me. And then my daughter with ear infections, my son with asthma, with nutrient deficiencies and more. And these are some things if I had focused on my preconception health, I had no clue what I was doing. And now that's why we got this podcast to educate people to be like, wait a minute, there's things we can do. So what's your take on, why is there such an increase in autism?
Yeah, well, there's lots of reasons. There's lots of stressors, and they all pile up and add up. I think one of the main things is that one of the keys is that we, these children with autism, they don't have good detoxification mechanisms. So I think we're all getting diminished in that, because you hear a lot about reading your genes so you can see what deficiencies you have and what's not working right, right? There's a big one on the MTHFR mutation, which is a methylation gene. And I really believe there's a mouse study from many years ago, at least a decade, that says that if you stress out a mom mouse and then 2 generations later, whatever genes you change by that stress will then be kind of permanent in that grandchild generation. I believe we can change our genes regardless because of epigenetics, but this is what this study showed. So there is some evolvement going on with particularly stress. That's all they studied, but think about all the toxins in our environment. So I think that genetically we're probably getting a little bit weaker. I mean, that's a really broad statement, but we're less able to handle the big load we have. And if you get a bad hand, so to say, like a poker hand, right, and you get a lot of deficiencies with your genes, then you're really kind of stuck. So you get all these toxins loaded in. Especially what we see is a lot of toxicities flow through the placenta, through the umbilical cord from mom to baby. So even if you do have donor eggs, right, and you're implanting that embryo in this body, the body should be as pure as possible. And so it's not, dumping these toxins. I think the body goes, oh, all right, garbage bag, let's get rid of this stuff. And so I think it's a setup. It's just a setup. And I think I heard Dr. Tom O'Brien quote, there's 247,000 pounds of toxins per day per person that are either produced or coming into the US. Just think about it. Like, what happens with the stuff we throw away? It goes in, this is a really big picture thinking, right? So it goes in our landfills or our septic systems, and that eventually gets into our groundwater. So like it kind of comes back to haunt us later. So if we think with a big picture mentality like that, I think our best offense is a kind of a defense of always having this defensive detox lifestyle.
Yeah, a lot of times we don't think there's anything we can do. We go to conventional medicine, we have take a medication. In this case, we're told that IVF is our only option, and there's other things we can do to optimize our health, our child's health, our future children's health. I had Dr. Ben Lynch on the podcast a while ago, and he was talking about that infertility potentially could be passed on. So so that's kind of like scary stuff. But so let's talk about so what are some of the factors that can impact autism? What are you seeing?
I've seen families with, usually it's the oldest child because they get the big dump of toxins from mom and dad. But I have seen families with 5 kids with autism, somewhere on the spectrum, right? Some kind of chronic thing. Maybe it's ADHD, maybe it's autism. I talked to a mom at a conference who like all 5 of her kids had autism. And I was like, wow, that must be really hard. And sometimes I see it's the youngest child, so I always wonder what happened to mom when she was pregnant. What kind of trauma did she have? That stuff matters. What kind of emotional stuff? And when I ask parents about their pregnancies, not everyone, but a lot of them say they had a trauma or it was difficult, or, the cord was wrapped around the neck, or, there was some stress on the baby. I don't think anybody really knows what exactly all contributes. There's theories, but I think it's a real combination of things, honestly.
So what about I guess we can talk about a few of them now, sort of some of the ones is it like inflammation or gluten, digestion, sort of some of the common ones that are popping up. What do you see?
Oh my gosh, it can be everything. Like you think about if mom has antibiotics during a pregnancy, it can mess with the gut flora. If there's studies that show that the kids who were gestating in the womb live near a highly pesticide sprayed field, the incidence of autism is higher. So do you live near a freeway where the exhaust is coming out? I have a mom that I work with, her son and her family, where she grew up in Iowa near a factory that made tractors, but they were always smelting metal. And she told me her dad, every weekend, he worked at the factory, but every weekend they had white aluminum siding on their house. He would go spray the black off of the house. This is what she grew up with. So her son has autism. She had many failed pregnancies. And when she did bring him to full term, he had autism and he wasn't vaccinated. A lot of kids who will have reactions to vaccines. And that's just another stressor. I'm not saying they cause autism, but I'm saying they do contribute to the big load that kids have. It's a big part. It's a big load. That particular one. So he wasn't vaccinated. She was really careful. I find out later they eat junk food. They didn't have the cleanest diet, and that contributes too. Think about everything you do in your day. What can you do to minimize, yes, eat gluten-free. Yes, eat organic. Yes, eat non-GMO. Yes, clean up the EMFs that are bombarding your house. Get your house checked for what kind of voltage. This is another study that I think Dr. Klinghardt has some. It's not a study. He went and measured parents' homes for their EMFs, where they were sleeping, where mom was sleeping when the baby was in the womb. And he found that she was in a high EMF environment, like really loaded with EMFs, or where the baby was sleeping. So all of these things matter, and they all add up. They might be, 1 gram here and 1 gram there. Pretty soon you get to a kilogram and you've got a big load.
Yeah, I know when I was growing up, we were in this forest and we were in a cedar house, and we was always infested with carpenter ants. So that little sprayer guy was coming on a regular basis, spraying our house for these ants. And our dog died of cancer at like 10. My brother has blood cancer. I had infertility, at being told at 28, premature ovarian insufficiency. Was it the fact that also my dad's a chemist, and he had a chemical company since I was 7. I used to work in there too as a teenager. I had no clue on any of these things. My brother worked there for years with my dad. I don't know. Did the fact that we were inhaling?
What are you breathing in? Right?
Yeah.
Working with those chemicals.
I know. And so can you just kind of so let's talk about, so obviously in our Fab Fertile method, we talk a lot about gut infections and food sensitivities and nutrient deficiencies, obviously for the male and the female partner to optimize your egg and your sperm health. And so, in this case with autism, what are you seeing around food sensitivities, gluten? What's your take on that?
Oh yeah, the kids have it for sure, but mom likely has. I always ask about the mom's history too, and how was the birth, and how was the pregnancy, and if the mom has allergies and gut issues, and they mainly do. A lot of them have constipation, so that's a big one. For people listening, get your constipation fixed. If you are not pooping 1 to 4 times a day in a smooth form log, you are probably have issues with your bowels, and it's super important. The other thing I would say in kind of cleaning your environment to host a baby growing in there is the use of binders. You probably talk about that. You talk about that in your program. So just in case someone's new and they don't know what that means, a binder is you guys might know activated charcoal. So activated charcoal is if someone swallows poison and you go to the hospital, first they try to make you throw up, but then they give you activated charcoal, it's burned wood, and it'll just it'll soak up all the toxins, right? So that's a binder. It binds toxins. So there are many, many different kinds of binders that will bind different things. Some bind mold toxins, some bind other biotoxins from pathogens, some bind heavy metals. So what you want to do, especially if you're constipated, is use binders. Now, activated charcoal it tends to be constipating, so that might not be your go-to, but you need to find a binder that is going to hold on to these things. So even if the feces sits in your colon for a longer time, the toxins aren't getting reabsorbed. So that is a big one. And I start using those with the autistic kids, and they start having less anxiety. They don't have stimming actions as much. They sleep better. They calm down. So it's huge. Like, it's huge. Our body is going to reabsorb stuff if it doesn't eliminate it.
And for our listeners, we've done a deep dive into constipation. There's a whole episode in there, so you can search for that. And we talk about all different strategies to help, because that is key. We see so many people coming to see us with, they think it's normal to go 1 to 3 times a week instead of, like you're talking about, 1 to 3, 1 to 4 times a day, which is normal. And then, and I also did a whole podcast episode with Dr. Marisol. We were talking all about the 12 things of poop, and like, it's a banana, it's the size of your arm, like all this sort of thing, where we're like thinking it's just supposed to come out like little rabbit turds, and
that's constipation.
Constipation. And we've had people that have had this, and then within months in our program making these changes, probably similar to yours, where you can start making these changes, and all of a sudden they're going regularly, and it's a relief. Because
they sleep better.
Yeah.
They think better. They feel better, right? They have more energy. And so that's what I see with the kids with autism. You just really literally need to get the crap out of them.
Yep. And so, and what kind of gut infections you're seeing? Is it typically yeast or fungal things? What are you seeing with
yeast? Definitely C. diff, Pseudomonas. I mean, there's different things. It really depends, but bad guys who can eat something like glyphosate. That glyphosate is the active ingredient in the herbicide Roundup. So I know people are Roundup happy. They love to spray this stuff, and we spray it on crops. So there are microbes in our gut that will eat that as a fuel. And then the good guys don't. So if we're eating non-organic stuff that's sprayed with that, that can really disrupt our flora. That can create leaky gut. It makes the cells pull apart in the intestine. Yeah, I honestly don't focus so much on the gut infections. We just kind of know they're there. And then we use things to, first of all, what I do is open up the colon so they're pooping every day. And then we start using herbs and other things that are going to start adjusting those microbes. Of course, probiotics is one of the things, and changing the diet is so huge, because if you give the microbes all those carby snacks to eat, right? Potatoes and French fries and chips and rice, all the carbs, then that feeds them. But if you eat good fats and proteins, that's not going to give them as much fuel, as much hold in the gut. So parasites are huge too, because the food for parasites are toxins, and that's what these kids are loaded with, right? That's what we're loaded with. My mentor in this field says, how do you tell if you have parasites? You take your 2 fingers, you put them here on your neck. Do you have a pulse? If you have a pulse, you have parasites. It's not just for third world, countries anymore. And so, because we're pretty toxic generally as a society, we have little critters who like to eat that stuff. They're helping us, but they create their own problems. And so parasites are huge. So we do big parasite cleanses, and things come out of these kids that you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, no, I believe it.
You would believe it, but I mean, maybe a listener, when you see a 3 foot long thing that looks like a worm in your child's stool, it's a little alarming. Mm-hmm. And you know what I say? Better out than in. This is our mantra, better out than in for everything,
And what about the nutrient deficiencies? So, we see a lot of people, taking birth control, and that can then also antibiotics and all that, but that can then impact nutrient deficiencies. So what are you seeing with nutrient deficiencies?
Sure. Are we visual?
Yep. Yeah. They can go to this on YouTube and check it out there. So yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to do something with my hands. That's why I asked. Give an example. So my mentors also say toxicity creates deficiency. So I guess, yes, hormones and antibiotics that will create also a toxicity. But if you have a reaction and you have in your body, this is body biochemistry. If you have one thing that goes to B, that goes to C, that goes to D. So these are just different chemicals that your body needs. Each of those are mediated by enzymes. And so enzyme A takes compound A and converts it to B. Enzyme B takes B and converts it to C, and so on. But if you get to enzyme, let's say C, and you have a bunch of toxins that affect that, right? You have a toxicity. It's like putting up a hurdle. So you can't just jump from A to B to C. You can't pass. And so what you do is maybe you go, oh, maybe I need more methyl B12 or folinic acid or whatever. So you put all this in with the vitamins, right? And then you could get over that hurdle. But if you take the toxicity out, you have no hurdle. So you don't need to add the extra supplements and nutrients. So what I found is that when you these deficiencies created by toxicities are, if you take the toxicity out, you actually don't need a lot of extra supplements. You might for a little bit, and you have to be eating well, and you get the nutrients from your food. And from the right microbes in your gut that make those things for us, right? We have a microbe in the gut that makes B12 for us. And we have microbes that will break down toxins for us. And so you need the right mix of microbes in the gut also that are going to really nourish.
Anything else with what you're looking at as far as to help?
For the gut?
Just for your sort of your methodology in general, is there anything that we haven't touched on?
Let me think about that for a sec. The one thing I find, and this may not be totally relevant for the people listening right now, but the one thing I find is that I can give someone a bunch of supplements and a protocol and say, here, go do this. And it gets very confusing very fast. So even if you give someone supplements, maybe it's easy for, your people who are trying to get pregnant. But for kids who have all these behaviors and they're up and down all the time, it's challenging because they might give a supplement and something happens, right? We only start one supplement at a time, and you may have sensitive people, right? And if you take 5 things at once, it doesn't work. Things go really out of kilter. So you have to go really low and slow and start with a little. What I found is parents get concerned and they're not sure and they're a little bit fearful. What happens if I give this? Oh my gosh, she's got really hyper after I gave this one. And then I find the guidance is really important. So that's probably what you do in your program, like really guiding people on the nitty gritty is I found super helpful. And that's what helps. We're so concerned about our kids, right? Like we really care about them. We really want them to be well all the time. So I found that when parents have access to almost daily guidance, whatever they need, is when it really works well, when they're really able to implement this protocol that to me seems like, a no-brainer, but to someone who's first doing it, it's scary and it's hard and it's there's challenges along the way. So the daily guidance or the weekly guidance and reassurance that they're doing the right thing is really, really helpful. So it's not just let's give these vitamins or let's take these parasites out. It's like, let's do it together and hold hands while we're doing it.
I agree. We have a similar approach because you can give a protocol and then, someone can go and pound and take the whole thing, have all these different, die off reactions, not feel well. And then sometimes along the way, you start to second guess, is this even working? Oh my goodness. And especially, I've helped both my kids with these sort of things. And a lot of the kids are like, don't want to take these, throw them over their shoulder. When we moved from our last house, I had found my son had he'd hidden these supplements all over the whole freaking house. I literally found them I'm like, oh my God, this was like probably thousands of, I'd give them to him and I'd assume he was taking them. And no, we never assume. So that was a bit of a disaster. So yeah, the supplement piece and then the guidance is key because you'll second guess yourself. And then you're like, is this even working? You got to give it time too for some of the things. And then it's not forever. So yeah, having assistance and guidance is key. I totally believe that.
Yeah. Well, what I find too is sometimes like we'll hit a pocket of toxins with something and then there's a die-off reaction. But if you have someone there to talk to about it or to say, this is what's happening, and I'll say, oh yeah, let's just go slower. Let's just decrease this thing. Then they're better able to go forward, is what I'm finding. But because I'll give you an example. I had a mom who on her 2-year-old, she gave too much of a binder, a binder that not only stays in the gut and holds toxins, but it goes around the body and pulls toxins. And she said, oh, he started pulling on his ears and he started kind of hitting his forehead. And I said, I think maybe we're giving him too much binder. It's just really strong for him. And she wasn't giving that much, half a capsule, maybe. I said, let's go down with that. And we went down with something else and he just mellowed right out. And then he was able, this is a 2-year-old, he was able to take turns with his brother, which was something that was difficult. So little things that we take for granted, they see these gains and they're like, oh yeah, that really helped. But if she didn't have that guidance, she probably would have been like, this is making him worse. It's not working. It's not worth it. I'm stopping.
Exactly. And how do you use genetics in your program? What are you seeing there?
It's funny that my major was in genetics and cell biology. And I worked for a company that during the human genome sequencing project, my company made the DNA sequencers that sequence the human genome. So I know a lot about DNA and genetics. And some parents come to me with their genetics done on their kids. I don't do it. I don't, I think there's value in it if you really want to know, but I just assume that because I've seen it again and again, that when we pull the toxins out, you're pulling them off the DNA, which messes up the reading of the gene. You're pulling them off enzymes, which messes up with their ability to make biochemistry happen in the body. So again, just like I showed earlier, if you take the toxin off an enzyme, you take the hurdle out of the way. If you take a toxin off DNA or out of the connective tissue or out of the liver or whatever cells, out of the mitochondria, they can make more energy. So I trust the process that when you take the toxins away, things are going to correct themselves, including the genetics. Will they fix that mutated gene? Maybe with neuromodulation. I believe anything is possible in the body. If you think about it, we talk about when we have mutations, right? DNA will mutate when a cell reproduces. Well, how do we know it always has to mutate in a negative direction? What if it mutates in a positive direction and fixes that gene? So I personally don't put a lot of stock in genetics. I had one parent come to me recently who said, oh, this is the report. And then they recommended like 30 supplements for their child. And she's not going to do that. It's not worth it to try and get all, like you said with your son, like he's hiding supplements all over the house. It's not worth it to try to get all that stuff into your child. I try not to work with more than 5 to 10 supplements at a time because, it's hard. It's hard to get them in. So anyway, back to the point about genetics. I trust that when we take toxins out, that's going to go a long way. And then if we need to, I'll work with the neuromodulation and help that along too. But there's a lot we can do before we have to go. It may not even be necessary to go into that, I'm thinking.
Yeah, my son's 17 and I don't go on any more than 2. He had too many when he was young, and now I'm like, okay, I'm screwed. So he's got ADD.
But will he take him now?
ADHD. Oh no, I stand over him like it's ridiculous. The boy is almost a man, and I'm like, here's his mom with a thing. I'm like, we've got to help your zinc and your B. But yeah. Anyways,
it helps when people can swallow capsules, and not everyone can swallow capsules.
And he's totally fine with doing that. He can swallow. Yeah, and he's afraid of needles. So that's a whole other thing. But so that's what we're what we're doing. But okay, what about some of the diet and lifestyle? Actually, I want to go back to that the neuromodulation. Are you using that as part of your system, or what are you doing with that?
I do. The way I work with parents is I usually will I learn no more one sessions, because one session you don't really get the results. It's because it's a process. So I usually work with people for a year and do 12 session package of the neuromodulation. Um, and as a piece of that, they also get, we do a bunch of assessments. We could do diagnostic tests, or I could do muscle testing type assessments, and just to give a picture of what's happening inside the body. And then what I'll do is kind of give them what I call a body biomap report. And it's like a look on the inside of the body. And these are all the areas we need to work on that are deficient. And so I give them a protocol to take the toxins out. So it's customized for their child, but we do the NMT, the neuromodulation, every session. And boy, it's incredible. We can see like usually a big bowel movement that night, usually good sleep. And these kids don't sleep that well. Usually, because what we're doing is we're putting the body in a rest and digest, a parasympathetic mode that allows healing. It allows letting go, right? It allows calmness. So over time, what we see is better focus and eye contact. I've seen parents have told me their kids don't want to play with their iPad anymore. They want to come out and play with their siblings. Really reduce anxiety. And when you start taking toxins out, like kids stop stimming. So stimming is like a repetitive motion or vocal. Kids start, their cognitive improves because their brain is less foggy. So they're able to do schoolwork better, and they start interacting more. So a child on the autism spectrum is typically, socially isolated in their own world by their own making. And they begin to speak, words start to come out. And that's not the first thing to happen though, right? Other things have to be in place neurologically. Sometimes we integrate primitive reflexes. I work a lot on balancing the autonomic nervous system. So bringing the body into rest and digest, because these kids are constantly in fight or flight. So that's a big one. We work on emotional things. There's, it's just whatever needs correcting in the body. A lot of times we'll work on the immune system, allergy, gut, always, that goes without saying. I mean, no, I guess I have to say it. We're working on the gut as well, and the gut brain connection.
And the neuromodulation. So how do we find a practitioner? So you're some of the, I guess, in person in some of those sessions. Like, how are we? Someone who's checking for, because there's a lot of, I think if you look this up, you're gonna come up with major quackery around this muscle testing piece that it's, So how do we find one that's a practitioner that's
Yeah, on my website, I've tried to explain, if people go on my website, autismtransformed.com, and they go under the NMT, under services, NMT, I've tried to explain with videos and also, some language, how NMT works and how muscle testing works and how distance healing works. So none of my clients come in person, and I can still do neuromodulation. I can still do the muscle testing. I'm the surrogate for muscle testing, and I do it with my fingers like this. So I have a resisting finger and a push down finger, right? So I can get yes and no answers and feel it in my fingers. And I'm just connecting mind to mind with the person I'm working on. And that's also a quantum physics principle called non-locality. So I'm able to get the answers by reading, answers in quotes, by reading in quotes, the child's mind or their body. And NMT is a protocol set up where you just have a bunch of questions you get yes, no answers to, and it just kind of takes you down a path. So I can work on allergies, I can work on toxins, I can work on infectious agents, and 100 other things in the body. So yeah, on my website, I explain it. I've been doing it for 15 years. And then the person who teaches this is a chiropractor, Dr. Leslie Feinberg. He's in Oregon, and he developed this in 2002. His website, in case you want to find a local practitioner, is www.nmt, so the neuromodulation technique, NMT, MD, like medical doctor. And you can find there's practitioners listed there, and not everyone who does it is listed on there. I think you have to, jump through some hoops to be listed there. But there are many good practitioners who I focus on autism because that's my passion, but they'll help you in many other ways too.
And that was Dr. Leslie, is it Feinberg? How did you spell that?
Feinberg, Feinberg.
Got it. And then they go to nmt.md to check out that. Okay,
yes.
Awesome. And is there a success story? I'm sure you have tons you wanted to share, to highlight for us.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a boy, so I don't have all the details in my head, but he was picky eater. A lot of these kids are picky eaters because the microbes want us to eat what they want. So very picky eater. I don't think he had any language. I'm trying to remember. I think he was maybe 4 or 5 when I started working with him. He was going to a therapy called ABA. It stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis. It's a little bit like training a dog. Do this and I'll give you a treat. Do this and I'll give you a treat. Do this and I'll give you a treat. And different ABA therapists apply it more, differently. So it could be really good. It's really training the nervous system, right, to do certain things. So he had that therapy, which wasn't going very well. He would play on an iPad. He wouldn't interact with his sibling. He didn't respond to his name being called. That's very common. Kids have auditory issues and cognitive. So after working together for about 6 months, and we did have him on a detox protocol, he was eating lots of foods. He started playing with his siblings several times a day, his younger brother, just for a few minutes at a time, but that was better than nothing. Trying to remember what else. He got really chatty. He was super, super chatty in the background of our video calls. So he was really learning language like crazy. And I'll tell you another thing that helped him with language and what helps kids is methyl B12 injections in their bottom while they're sleeping. And you put an anesthetic over too, so they don't feel it. But what else happened with him? Lots of other things. His anxiety really reduced. His stimming, he had eye contact, so he didn't have eye contact. And he was really more integrated with the family. And so, if you have a child who's off always in their own room playing and, never interacting, and then they're interacting and they're playing and it's heartwarming, right? So that was just one story. I love when I'm seeing parents. I have another boy who's 6, and he really responds to the NMT very well. And he became more social with kids in his class. He had a play date, and then he was remembering things that were happening in the play date. He was doing some behaviors like he would take down his pants and just pee in front of his parents on the floor just to be kind of naughty. And so that stopped. Like he got that, oh, I don't do that. His language it was exploding. He was speaking, and that was his mom's biggest concern. He wasn't speaking. So we got him speaking and social and playing with his little brother. And so these are just a couple examples of, it's really heartwarming to see these kids
work, like it literally, impacts family, friend, like a whole pocket of that family is now being able to, because, when you're dealing with a child that's, perhaps struggling, it's stressful for the parents.
It's stressful. That's one of the questions that I ask parents. Like, how is this affecting your child mentally, emotionally? How is it affecting you as a parent? How is it affecting your family dynamics? Because usually that one child is getting all the attention, the other kids aren't. I had one mom recently who's like, well, I have to, when he misbehaves or has a tantrum, then I'm with him. And then the other kids who I'm supposed to be homeschooling aren't getting their lessons. Right. And then a lot of times parents kind of walk on eggshells because they don't want their child these kids can be very rigid. And if like the chair is moved, over a foot, it shouldn't be, then they throw a fit. Or if the shoes are not lined up at the door the way they want them. Or if their timing of their schedule is off, like, oh, no, we don't leave until this time, or no, this comes before this, then they can really just get out of sorts and have huge tantrums. So parents, like, really manage the schedule tightly around them. And then it's just super stressful. It requires a lot of energy. The parents' relationship degrades. They don't get to spend time with each other. So it has a huge family impact, huge. Even someone with a chronic illness, like I imagine someone with an, let's say an anaphylactic reaction to peanuts, right? And you have to carry the EpiPen, and you always have to be careful that they're not eating this or not putting, especially when you're crawling around, right? They're not crawling around and getting next to a peanut. It's stressful to have a child who has these special things you have to watch out for.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I don't want the parents listening to have a child that they have. I mean, these are special needs childs, I mean, if we have a child like that, we have a child like that. And it really builds our resilience, and we work with whatever's dealt to us. We rise to the occasion as humans. We're really great at that, but it would be a lot easier if you have some ease in all the health of your kids.
Absolutely, because in conventional medicine, you're told there's not a lot you can do. Whereas it's so, obviously all of this stuff is really empowering to know there's things you can do. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing all your words of wisdom on this. So they can find you.
I want to say one more.
Go ahead.
Wait, can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
Because I have a colleague and friend who her son had ADHD, which isn't, it's not like autism, but there are issues, right? Like tension and a little bit craziness can happen. And when he was 5, she went to the doctor, and this is conventional medicine, and he was on 1 medication, and then it became 2, and then it became 3. And then when they wanted to put him on 4, and these are all to manage the symptoms of the previous medication, she said, no, there's got to be a different way. And she changed the diet. She got the artificial colors and flavorings out. And she did there's so much research on this, and he became a different child. So even like so many kids have ADHD, I'm just saying conventional medicine, it doesn't have all the answers. If you're in a trauma and you break your leg, great. But if you have to have a medication to manage your other medication something's not right, and check it out.
Yeah, that's why I'm so passionate about this. Both my kids have ADHD. Like it's, and growing up with them, I literally almost lost my mind. I don't talk a lot about this on the podcast just because obviously I'm helping people to have children. And obviously I talk about, the preconception health and my things. And, it wasn't early. It was hard during the postpartum period. And really for a lot of, as you say, we rise to the occasion. And then to me, I found all of this stuff and I'm like, oh my goodness. If we can see these major changes in your children, you can see it right in front of you. And then you still, sometimes you second guess yourself, you get someone else. Like I don't second guess myself anymore, but in the early days, it would be like, oh no, the doctor's telling you this. And you've got to really like hold the line there and really surround yourself with people, like-minded people, not that you're all thinking the same way, but, that there's other ways of looking at this. So they can find you. You have an autism recovery action guide. They can find it autismtransformed.com, and we'll have that link in the show notes. So what can they expect with that?
Oh, it just shows free things you can do to really. It's really about lifestyle changes that can show immediate behavior changes. And one is going gluten and dairy free. And like 80% of parents see changes just with that. And, as a parent to be, or someone wanting to be a parent, or as a human, you may also try going gluten free for a couple weeks and then put gluten back in and see how you feel. Like that's the most noticeable thing. So anyway, my point is try things out, be open-minded. And and that guide is just free actions you can do.
Amazing. Any final thoughts on this, Luminera?
I think we covered it all. My final thought is no matter what you're in, whether you're trying to conceive, you have a child who has special needs or whatever, just always know, I'm holding out hope for you. Like hope is key. And be grateful for, give your gratitude before the thing happens, and you're putting energy into that. So hope and gratitude.
I love that. Thank you so much for all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, you're welcome.